What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the garage, and we have the man, the myth, the legend, Silversurfer77, aka Dan Kunkel, joining us live today to talk about, well, just a little bit of everything. Tuning, cars, what's going on in the car world. Dan, you been falling sick week any?
Pardon, say that one more time?
You been falling sick week any?
No, I have not.
Yeah.
Clue me.
Yeah. It's Tom Bailey. Tom Bailey wasn't able to make a pass with his Pro Mod Camaro, or he made a pass and had to turn in 20 seconds, and so he just quit his own event. Couldn't win, so he's like, I'm just going to quit. Okay, audio is a little low. Let me turn it up a notch. What about Dan's audio? Dan, say something. Let's make sure you're good.
Microphone check. One, two.
You're good. I think it's just me.
Okay.
Oh, and okay, there we go. Now it's too loud. Okay, there.
Man, you just can't please everybody.
Well, you know. The problem is I sit forward, I sit back. Okay, we're good now. Yeah, I was a little miffed whenever he decided I can't win, so I'm just going to quit. I was like, bro, you put on this event. Like, the whole point of a drag and drive event is to make it to the end, whether you win or not. Like, just kind of seemed like a little bitch move, in my opinion. Who we got? We got ICT Car Guy in here. Kinghead TV, good to see you again. David Schmidt, Chris, De La Soul, Andrew, Cowabunga Racing, nice to see you. Welcome to the live show. Hey, Kamar, Gabe. And, yeah, Gabe says, has used info from both you guys in tuning my car. That's why he's here, so we can talk about that stuff.
Sweet.
Arkansas Matt says, Tom joined the Cletus Channel's Cheap Drag Car Challenge. LOL. Yeah, LOL is right. I was talking to somebody else about it. It's like, well, it's expensive to do this. And I was like, no more expensive than going out and spending $8,000 on a piece of crap car so you can compete in your own event. Everybody's here to see these silly-ass pro mods. The thing about it is these guys that run these things, it's fun to watch it, but at the same time, they take like 6 hours to go from street to track mode on these things. Like, they're jerking radiators off, all kinds of crazy stuff, and it's like, I won't get my soapbox out to complain about dudes racing pro mods and drag and drives, but
yeah, well, there's street cars, and then there's street cars, I suppose.
Yeah.
But maybe Street Outlaws brought us all to that kind of level of pro mod street cars.
Right. Well, I don't know. They can't seem to make them last. I get a tickle out of it every time I watch it because anything that has a SMX motor in it from Steve fails. It just reliably. That's the only thing reliable about that motor is it never should have been put on the street.
Oh man.
And I wish
if I could scrape enough money, maybe I'd find out myself. But I don't even want to know what those motors cost.
Oh, they started at around 100,000, which is asinine. But I mean, you're making 4,000 horsepower.
If you can afford that kind of car or motor, then you can afford it to break down and repair.
Well,
right?
That's the thing, especially on those. Like, everybody acts like whenever something like that breaks down, the motor's done. No, that's the big thing about running those billet blocks is they can repair those things.
Yeah.
They can weld them up and remill them, and so the initial investment is high, but you've got more in like stretching rods whenever they're running those billet aluminum rods or something like that, but. We'll never have that problem. Though I've probably spent more than enough money to buy a couple SMXs at this point in time, I will never put that much money in one motor.
Yeah, it's kind of silly to think, but it's live and learn, right? Because you're trying to figure out what works, what combo's good, what parts are good, and, it breaks and build back stronger. That's just the way it goes.
Exactly. Well,
that's the love of the game,
And I'm slightly impressed, as much hate as I give Steve over there on his SMX motors. I'm impressed that he keeps on, for lack of a better term, pounding his head against the wall trying to figure it out. And I think he will. It's a hard thing to break into whenever you're used to making solid deck blocks that are for one pass, and then it's, going back and you're putting the blowers on it to cool it off and loading it up on trailer. Getting something that can handle 4,000 horsepower and drive down the road is impressive.
Sure.
So
Sure.
I'm always anxious to see how that shakes out. But oh well. What have you been doing lately? You got anything new going on?
Man, well, on the tuning front, I've started to do the bin file hacking. So
Oh,
using
have you?
Gidra and decompiling it and really looking at the hexadecimal with kind of the intent of building custom XDF files, but also looking at the actual logic. You know, I don't know if you saw my last end of injection target video, but you know, lots of help from Verlin, our Russian hacker friends.
Right.
The fount of knowledge, right? So, you know, just the way he can go in there and just like figure out, well, here's the actual logic that's going on. And like, here's all the other 9,000 tables HP tuners didn't expose to us.
Right.
Really like, I mean, that's inspiring. Like, how does it work? How do I make it work? I don't know that I'll ever be able to change the logic, right?
Right.
Or I can and then recompile it. That apparently that's pretty dangerous, or you're standing a good chance of bricking your ECM. Maybe
Right.
one day, but right now, just to kind of map out. Right now, E38, move on to E67. You know, me and my love for the Gen 4
Right.
stuff, right?
Right.
So
Well, it's a great platform, and honestly, if you figure out any hidden tables around cruise control, let me know. I've got some ideas kicking around in my mind. I was driving home, hell, I don't know, yesterday. I've been sick, so I've been not out and about, but I was thinking, man, I would really like to change the responsiveness of cruise control on this thing.
you know, it's funny. Some cars seem to do really good, just in general. Not the tuned up hot rods, but just the daily drivers. Man, there's such a wide variety, but it's just the PID controller, I'm pretty
Right.
sure. But it's amazing the different, responses that you get going uphill and under different load on the torque converter and everything. So,
Yeah, I would love to be able to adjust the gain on that a little bit.
yeah.
Let me ask you this much,
Uh-oh.
because I know it's going to pop up in the chat, and I've got a couple already. Where we at on recreating Blue Cat's trans tool?
That wasn't on my radar, was it? Matt Sanford 2 weeks ago mentioned something about it. Like, first of all, I don't even, well, what's wrong with the Blue Cat tool? What needs to be changed?
I'll be honest with you, I don't know that anything needs to be changed. I think one of the things that I miss is the hooks that it used to have, where it just pull all the data straight out of a tune file, edit it, and then push it right back into the tune. So there was no manual stuff on it whatsoever.
It opened the HPT file natively.
Well, you would literally open up the HPT file in the editor,
Oh,
and it would hook into the editor and go to the tables. And as far as I know, it's been years. I worked with him, Blue Cat, on the VVE editor whenever he first put it out. I was one of the guys that tested it, and I don't know. It obviously super smart dude, and it's a shame he's not really in the industry anymore. I don't want to make any speculation on that stuff, but like it was like you opened up your tune, you opened up the Blue Cat editor, you hit the import button, it pulled all the stuff in, made the changes, then boom, pushed it right back out. It was almost completely hands off.
Yeah. There was another VVE tool that came out, and I can't remember the guy's name on the forum that did it, but I think it was after the Blue Cat VE tool, and it did the same thing, where as long as you had the tables open, it would suck the data out. And I wonder if maybe the change of why he had to pull that out of the transmission tool was because, you go in there in the Blue Cat transmission tool, and it's like, well, what style do you have? Is it like the downshift and upshift in the same table, or are they split out, or whatever? Are the breakpoints different? So it may be just the code to figure out like what table version you have.
Well, yeah, and
But
it's
believe
very hard
me,
to make all that stuff whenever
Yeah.
you got so many variations going on work.
But that's what I want to do for my VE editor, because I hate having to copy the coefficients and everything back and forth. I've decompiled their code, but I haven't really put too much effort into figuring out how that's done.
Right.
But I'd like to get there one day. But for me, working on the transmission, I used the Blue Cat tool a lot when I first started, and I really wasn't impressed with the overall drivability and the feel of it. Now, A, it may be because I'm not proficient at the tool, and B, because I'm pretty picky, right? And so like I'm like splitting hairs over 1 or 2 miles an hour of everything. So I feel like, you know,
Well, I think from the transmission side of things, it is the most subjective thing that we adjust and is very specific. The way you like it, I may not like it. The next person may hate it. Like, sorting all that out is, and that's why I tell people, I was like, yeah, I can get you there, but I need so much feedback from somebody because
mhm.
I'll go in there and set it up how I think it should be, and they may absolutely hate the way it drives. They may want it to be more aggressive or less and stuff like that. You know,
Well, when you have a loose converter, I think it really depends a lot on the driving style of the driver.
right?
Are you real heavy footed? Then it doesn't matter so much. But like for me, I like to, I mean, I'm in either like full baby mode or full abuse mode, right? So when
Right.
I'm babying it, I want it to shift at a tame RPMs, you know, and I'm cruising through the town square or whatever. You know, I'm not trying to be rowdy all the time. But yeah, so I agree with you. It is highly subjective. So that's why I find it hard to, how do you create a tool that's really going to solve all those problems that you can't do just by doing it directly in HP tuners. So
Bill said Monoxide 110 with Sam Barros is a great episode that people need to watch. I'm not familiar with Monoxide 110.
now, funny story about Sam Barrow. So I started doing high voltage stuff in like 1999, and early days of the internet, you know, dial-up modem, playing it like HTML 1.0.
Oh, yeah.
He had a website. I think it's still up. Sam Barrow's Power Labs and stuff. So I knew him from high voltage stuff, and only recently did I find out that I saw a video. He was doing some fuel injector development for some company, I think. So it's strange how
It's a
small.
small world. Small
Yeah,
world. Like the overlap is mind blowing,
yeah.
and that's kind of what I love about this side of it. Whenever you get into tinkering around with tuning and stuff like that, you find out that a lot of people have the same backgrounds or the same hobbies, you know, and honestly, I don't know. I short of some guys that are out there just trying to screw people over on tunes, but most of the tuners I've met out there are all great guys, and I enjoy talking to them and picking their brains and just learning off of them.
Yeah, for sure. We're getting some good questions in here. I've got my phone down here.
Oh yeah, Schmidt was talking about he's having an issue figuring out your VVE editor, and then Gabe said that there's a guy called Titan something that does an example of using your tool.
Yeah, Titan Tunes did his own video on using the VE editor or VE assistant that I made. Schmidt Head, I think he was the one that mentioned me to you in the first place about getting on the show. So Schmidt Head, reach out to me, send me a message on the forum or email me. Let me know. I'm happy to help you out on your problems with the editor or tool.
Brandon Loesch, welcome. Just searching for histogram tunings and you were live. Should I use it? Yeah, especially, I'll tell you this much, Brandon. If you do not have a process in place, this will streamline your approach to VVE editing so much. You know, that's the big thing is that Dan has created a tool that honestly we needed 15, 20 years ago, which is so weird to say. It's been almost that long that we've been on VVE at this point in time. There's not really been a viable way to easily approach the VVE table. And where that comes into play is a lot of the math formulas that are working in the background to take the coefficients, because whenever you're looking at virtual VE, you're not actually looking at a VE table. You're looking at a representation based off the coefficients that the ECU uses to calculate the what we're running in what would be, for lack of a better term, speed density. And so by all means, jump in, check it out. It's amazing. I can't push it enough. David, we're talking about Silver Surfer's VVE Assistant. Andrew, if you're available, grab a link over to his primary video and post it in the chat for the people that are unaware to it so they have something to go look at. Andrew wants to know thoughts on using stock OS versus custom 2-bar OS on Gen 4.
So I think is a pretty good question. And of course, the answer is it depends. I think the 2-bar OS is really nice, right? It does give you some additional features, right? And it has some patches involved. I think the biggest thing when you choose to go speed density and you stick to the OEM OS, you're still stuck with the virtual VE table, which honestly, I love virtual VE. It's great, but that requires you to really dial in over 4,000 RPMs, where the OEM OS, no matter what you do for the high RPM disable point at 4,000 RPMs, it goes pretty much 100% math input.
Right.
Right. So now the biggest drawback, in my opinion, on virtual VE is you only have 30 zones. Right. That's marginal for NA applications. And then you go 2-3 bar. You
get some big zones in there.
Right. So I think it depends, but
and on top of it, you, as you said, you get things like boost enrichment and stuff,
right?
Which is very nice. Especially he's talking about adding a Whipple to a 6-liter. That's a prime example of where boost enrichment is great, and not having that available on twin screws or anything that can make boost so low in the RPM range. It makes a big difference on that. Now, if you're running a Pro Charger or something like that where the boost curve's more predictable, even turbo, it's less important, I think, in that, because you can get in there and figure out kind of where the pedal breakovers are for your power enrichment and figure that out. But you're also limited to 2-bar, so you got to keep that in mind. Whereas VVE, I mean, hell, you could run 300 PSI on that. Granted, all of your zones would be complete and total huge sections, but it's unlimited. I mean, you can run 15,000 RPMs at 600 pounds of boost. And virtual VE, the math will work out and allow that to work to a point. Yep. To just do an extreme example.
So, and then there's also the defect, right, on the Gen 4 OSs, which I did a video on that one. I think it's called like Gen 4 ECMs can't handle speed density or something like that.
Right.
But there's the air calc mode defect, and it causes the fuel injectors to spike because the VE, which coefficient is it? The map squared coefficient goes haywire. So if you're trying to do speed density, you at least need the patch to fix that, or you can do the workaround, which, going back to Verlin, created a pretty handy workaround, which is instead of using 6 coefficients to calculate VE, just do it in 5. Just basically assume the map squared term is 0 and put all of the other weight on the other coefficients. So I did add that patch into the VVE Assistant in Verlin mode. There's a separate video talking about that as well. But there's a lot of things.
I need to get caught up then. I've fallen behind.
Yeah, dude. The last one I did, and every time I do an update, I'm like, okay, this is the last one.
Oh, yeah, right.
Before I go to version 2, right? And then... But anyway, the newest one, if you don't have that, please get it, because it does fix a lot of the slowness and the lagginess.
What's the quickest way to get the latest version? Where are you hosting?
I put all my stuff on my Google Drive, and the links are in the video description.
Okay.
So if you go to any one of the virtual VE Assistant ones, if you click on the link, it'll take you to the main repository.
If you're cool with it, I'm going to throw a link over to that in my descriptions also, so people can easily get over there. And if that's where the latest version is, I'll try and remember to do that tomorrow, because obviously I think more people need to have access to this stuff. And so
I appreciate it.
Yeah, and if you're in here watching this, or you're watching this after the fact, and you have not subscribed, what are you doing? So let's see.
And I'll just point out the software is free, right? This isn't a pitch to make you guys throw money at me, right? Not needed. But it is complex software, so you will need to watch the videos that I do that show you how to use it. to make you feel comfortable. I do, in my opinion, say that one of my very first videos is talking about how we have calculated the mass airflow wrong, right? And that's kind of where I introduced my concept of using the dynamic air because that way you can tune MAF and VE at the same time. Not everybody likes it. That's fine. Whatever, do your own thing. But again, it's free. So you're probably logging most of the PIDs anyway.
Right.
Just put it in there and compare them side by side and see where they're different or the same or whatever. But anyway, I highly recommend grabbing those formulas in there and the filters and using those, and you can plug those into the VE editor or the VE tool and be good to go. There's one other thing I was going to tell you, and now it has escaped my mind.
Well, I've got a question.
Okay. Lay it on me,
Specifically around flow factor. Does 4th gens use flow factor?
No, I think that's a 5th gen only.
I'm still trying to figure out the math behind flow factor.
I thought you already had that licked.
No, I bounced my head off of it for a month or so trying to figure it out. And the only thing that I could tell that there is a crossover that determines how much is being used on the MAF VVE blend for dynamic. And you can clearly see it as you're logging and going through those whenever you're running in dynamic and how it affects dynamic, but there is not a direct correlation to a percentage, because you might be seeing numbers of less than 10, then all of a sudden above 1,000 on flow factor. And that change that you're seeing, other than we know that when we're in this range, we definitely are weighing more on the VVE table than the MAF, but how that then I may be completely off base and totally wrong. I think that it is part of that dynamic final calculation on the 5th gens. And one of these days, I'm going to have to sit down with you. We're going to have to jam through some data logs and look at this and see if we can figure it out.
Yeah, send it over. And, it's funny you mentioned that, because I'm like, all right, one of these days, I'm going to buy a new vehicle. It probably will be a truck, so I can haul rocks and firewood and 4x4 and do, whatever. And just probably I should start dipping my toes in the Gen 5 world. It'll probably be a Gen 5. So a couple weeks ago, I'm like, I need another vehicle, honey bunny. So, but I'm like, I want a beater, right? I'm looking literally $5,000 trucks, right? So every dent I add is more character. And she's like, well, our daughter's getting ready to drive, so it'll probably be her vehicle. We need to spend more than $5,000. So we upped it to 10. And I'm like, surely we can get a decent truck for $10,000. So I'm looking at like, all right, Gen 4, I'm comfortable with this. Like, I'm looking at specific years. Man, they're just held together. I literally saw one that had a sheet metal screw holding on the trim onto the door. And it was
not surprised.
Yeah. And it was take your pick of how much rust, how much dents, how much smell, how much destroyed interior or whatever. So there's this one place out in the middle of nowhere, Kansas. And that was one of the first trucks we saw on our search, right? And I'm like, it's a 99 Silverado, right? GMT 800. And I'm like, I've had two. And after each one, I've said, no more.
Right.
I'm not getting another one. But this one, it's got like a suspension lift, a body lift. It's 33 motor tires. It's got like flames down the side, cowl induction hood. And my daughter she's 14, right? She's got her learner's permit. And she's like, please, Dad. And I'm like, no, that's the bottom of my list.
Right.
But after all day searching, I'm like, you know what? We made the trip out there. It was someone's baby. They took care of it, right? Now, it has a terrible paint job, but, no
you can tell it was loved.
Yeah, they took care of it. And it even has a reverse camera because it's got a 2-din stereo with the license plate frame camera. So now it's like, all right, I guess I got to learn Gen 3 stuff now. So it's got a P01.
Well, you won't have any issues. It's like going from working with lasers and stuff like that to using rocks to start fires in comparison. So,
See, and that's why I like the Gen 4s, because it has the perfect level of complexity, but it's still understandable and usable. And you're not going to the torque-based ECM on the Gen 5s or neural net stuff.
I'll be honest with you, even on the Gen 5s, if you do the Gen 4 steps properly, torque-based stuff is not a problem. Like it's so invisible in the background. Granted, it's, you know, we're doing more in transmission shifting on it, like we are on the 4th gen stuff. We are using it for sparking, but the general torque model that's in the 5th gen stuff is fairly right and goes much like the VVE. It already goes out beyond more foot-pounds of torque than you're capable of making, because it's scaled based off your cylinder air mass. So if suddenly you're adding a bunch of cylinder air mass, it knows that there's going to be a bunch more torque there already. And I have found, outside of the idle area, I've had to do very little on some pretty seriously modified stuff. I used to, back in the day, spend way too much time jacking with the virtual torque stuff. And so I've kind of backed off that. And, you know, but I will say the big thing on that, if you're working on any virtual torque platform, the air fuel, your math and your SD has to be dialed in, because all of your virtual torque is calculated off the airflow. Your airflow's wrong, your torque calcs are wrong, nothing works right. And so,
well, hey, maybe in 20, 25 years, I'll get back to you on that flow factor stuff. And I
exactly. You know, and that's the thing. It's one of those things. It's like, I've got so much going on. I don't know how much time I want to dedicate to something that may not pan out. It's such a theory at this point in time.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Bob asks, when would you draw the line for speed density on Gen 4? Cam size boost, like, what do you mean by draw the line, Bob? Speed density, you got to do it, period. Are you asking as far as when you would go strictly speed density as opposed to leaving the math in play? I'm going to tell you one thing. The nice thing about Gen 4 is you have a lot more flexibility with the mass airflow sensor than you do on the 3rd gen stuff. I personally love the mass airflow sensor, and I try to keep it in play at all times.
Yeah, I went back and forth. I did a lot of experimenting this past summer. I mean, I have the SS3 cam from GPI, right? And it's like 236, I think, or 233 degrees on the intake, and like 19 degrees overlap at 50 thousandths lift. Like, it's a big cam. It's not ultra radical, but you get on the HB Tuners forum and you listen to the experts, and they're like, oh man, any cam like that, you have to go speed density. And I've gone back and forth, and honestly, it has taken me a long time to refine the tune, and now it doesn't matter if I run it in speed density or not. Right now, my big factor is when I use the Performance Designs XS-LS3 intake manifold, I got a 103 millimeter throttle body. Well, I'm not going to choke it down with the factory math, because what's the point, right? So I go in speed density. It runs the same as when I put on the factory manifold with factory throttle body. I really can't tell the difference. So in some aspects, you will need it, right? Or you'll need to go in speed density, just depending on reversion potentially. And there's a lot of factors. Cam, are you running boost? What's your intake track like? Is it straight? Is it bent?
Yeah, and that's real important, because the laminar flow required for mass airflow, if it is not just coming across that sensor smooth, it will cause you nothing but headaches.
Yeah.
So, all that being said, try and keep it in play. Don't do math only. I saw somebody ask about still learning here. He says Gen 4 can't handle SD, so I'm better running only math. No, you're never going to be better off math only, ever. That's never going to be the case. As far as running SD only, yes, you can make a car perform correctly, especially if you take into account that the times where SD really shines is during transients or whenever you have reversion. as Dan talked about, that's where what we call SD is technically not speed density, but that's where it really works well, and that's why it's one of the older processes after we got away from alpha N and stuff like that. That was just basically RPM versus fuel flow. It works really good. It translates really well over to standalones, which most standalones, don't offer MAF support and stuff like that. So understanding that process, you're going to be a better tuner at the end of the day. MAP only does not exist. So
yeah. And the only other thing I'll throw in there is when you're steady state cruising, look at the log, look at the reported hertz coming from the MAF, look at the grams per second coming from the MAF. Is it flat or is it really unpredictable, right? If you're steady state, it should be perfectly smooth.
Right.
Then the follow-up to that is look how that's impacting your dynamic air. If your dynamic air is tracking with those waves, then you really have a problem.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the big thing to take away from this, because regardless of what it is, if it's mass airflow or SD only, dynamic airflow is the final decider on how much fuel is being delivered. And so, as Dan says, you can look at both of those trends of your pounds. Look at your... I do pounds per hour. Look at pounds per hour. Sorry, I'm old. I guess I got that old carburetor mentality. Look at whatever your units are, grams per second, pounds per hour. Look at those, because you can look at both your volumetric efficiency and your mass airflow and see those and see which one is influencing dynamic more. And that was one of the epiphany moments that I had, probably 5 or 6 years ago, really, is, wow, this is what's going on. And it suddenly started making a lot more sense of why we can make changes and not see representation of those changes, because we're not in, like you said, we're not in the point where we're utilizing it. We have to be aware of those things. Let's see, where are we missing here? Gabe, Matt Sanford on his L83 supercharged. That's going to be torque is the reason why the base timing table was at 30 seconds, but the scanner is showing single digits. Only needed single digits to create the amount of torque that was wanted for that power at wherever he was at. Totally normal. Mike Few, Silver, you run a truck map or an LS7 style? You run the card or the...
Not the card, just the one that has the fixed diameter tube.
Yeah.
It's what came on the car.
Yeah, so the LS7 style, you can scale up your intake tubing. Yeah. You don't have limitations. The truck MAF, I will say, get that crap out of there if you're wanting to run MAF. If you do want MAF, you want the card style. It gives you a lot more headroom, a lot easier to work with, especially whenever you get into custom tubing and stuff like that. You're not restricted to that, was it 3-inch, around 3-inch?
It's almost 4. Like, it's more than
that
3.5. Yeah, but it's not quite 4. But in my case, it was just cheaper to not buy the custom tube, buy the adapter for the wiring and the mount and weld it up and buy the MAF.
Well, and the point is that Dan's making whenever he says that is you can make a car drive as smooth on speed density as you can on the MAF. If you dial in your speed density properly, and it takes a little bit longer, you're going to have to log more, you're going to have to focus on hitting different cells more, things like that. It is possible. Yeah. And Thomas kind of had a follow-up on that, touch on the map resolution, 3-inch versus 4-inch intakes, and what is ideal for who. That's more of an airflow thing. And honestly, whenever you're talking about that, you're ducting on the end, on that side of things, there's so many misconceptions out there that we need this. Like, if you don't have a cam, everything that you do pre that is not going to make a difference. If your engine does not have the ability to breathe more air, giving it more air on the intake side, you're not going to see any difference if it's already maxed out what it can pull in on a intake stroke. And so that's why I see a lot of dudes, including me in the past, go out there and I'm buying these big throttle bodies and all this fancy cold air. And that's why I hate cold air intakes from the get-go, because cam, heads, exhaust. Like, all these things work together to determine how much airflow. We're just working on an air pump at the end of the day. We need to optimize that air pump to make more power. More air means more fuel, means more power. Don't start chasing things that aren't going to help you out.
Rule of thumb from what I do at work every day, always solve for the biggest bottleneck.
Bingo.
Right?
That's perfect.
If the cam and heads aren't letting you breathe, then putting upstream or downstream stuff isn't going to solve that.
Exactly. That's exactly it. All this stuff is like, oh, these long tube headers are good for 70 horsepower. Well, not on those heads. Not with that cam. Like, it's just, it's not possible.
Yeah.
Let's see. King Hated says, I've got an 01 Suburban cammed. Have been learning and tuning on it. Ideally, it's pretty reliable. I can't seem to get lower than 56 to 63 MPA or KPA on the map. What, man, that's, it's not a crazy cam. Should I go back to RAF, BRAF, etc.? It's drive-by-wire. So, what's your issue? 5863, you should be able to dial that in that area. Whenever you're talking about idle KPA, whenever you get above 80, call me then and tell me how hard it is to get things dialed in on idle.
Shoot, I think my car idles about 73 KPA, and I had to work. It was 75, 78. So
yeah, and I'll tell you, at that point in time, one of the things that can kick you in the butt on that is if you have closed loop on. Closed loop does not like whenever we're idling and have a bunch or have a very low vacuum, I've found. And so a lot of times I'll set the closed loop enable if there's a way of triggering that off RPM to wait until I'm off idle and get some airflow in there, because you're getting reversion. Literally, if you were able to model the exhaust pulses, you would see the exhaust going back into the cylinder on some of that stuff. And when that's happening, it's pulling fresh air into the exhaust and really screwing with things and will cause all kinds of issues. Even on your wideband reading, you'll get really funky wideband readings. So just keep that in mind. But 5863, you shouldn't have much of an issue.
So question though. So I've been thinking a lot about reversion in general, and they make stepped headers, which are supposed to fight that. And I want to say it goes opposite the way you think, where they start out big and they go smaller, and that actually prevents the reversion. Have you ever experimented with those?
I have not. As I said, I normally, and on the vehicles I have this issue on, I looked at just disabling any kind of closed loop stuff, and that's whenever you get back to doing the old school kind of tuning tricks where you're using vacuum readings to set timing, set your airflow or your fuel flow in that area in a way where it idles good. Don't really look at your sensors and that stuff. Listen, smell, use your senses on that, because idle is probably, whenever you get into crazy cams and stuff like that, where you're going to fight the most. Idle, cold start's really a big issue. God knows every cold start's an issue for everybody in one way or another. Yeah. And we're feeling it right now. So what the hell commercials? I probably have commercials on, sorry. Yeah, commercials because I have Lambos to purchase. No.
More like Vipers.
I don't even have it anymore. I got rid of it. I hated that car.
You got rid of all your Vipers. Your Viper collection is down to zero.
Yes, from 1 to 0.
Well, that's all.
I hated that car.
Really?
Which is a shame. It was the best looking car I've probably ever owned. I absolutely despised to drive it.
Oh man, when those cars came out in the 90s, they were the sickest.
Oh yeah.
I've always been a GM fan, but I saw my first Viper and I was like, wow, you got to be kidding me. That's amazing.
I loved it until I got in it. Then I hated it. And
really?
So, like, seeing around the garage and looking at it was great, but it's way too expensive a car to not enjoy driving. And honestly, the thing that blew me away the most about it was how damn small it was. The fitch-in was so small. My buddy at the time had a Porsche 911, and the Porsche 911 was bigger than the Viper was.
Really?
Yeah. And
Wow.
so it looks huge. You've got to put it next to something that you see all the time. If you put that thing next to like a C7 Corvette, the C7 Corvette would dwarf it.
Wow.
Oh, man. Hated the dash. Early versions had it Velcroed. God, a good header is an art and a science. Listen, Thomas, when it comes to headers, I just try to find something that fits because it seems like half the time it just does not fit right.
Yeah. So then, Thomas, what headers do you suggest? What's your poison?
Are you coming from the art side or the science side? What? Let me ask you, Dan. If you had a brand of headers that you had to stand behind, or as a go-to, what would you say they were?
Well, I've been a fan of American Racing headers. I think they do a good job. I think the biggest problem, though, anytime you're dealing with a production car, it comes down to this is the last thing that we thought of, right? And we got to get it to fit. Yep. The collector is not placed at an optimal position, distance-wise, length-wise. You're right. The X isn't in the optimal position, but man, it's what fits.
Yeah.
So I would love to have, experiment with some custom-made Tri-Y headers, see what that does. I think that would be totally badass.
Get a TIG welder and just start making them, man.
It's funny. I'm toying around with creating my own intake manifold with 3D printer. I've got some ideas, but
let me know. I'll take a square port one whenever you get built.
I'm trying to I need to get an old junk block, right? A Gen 4 block. And I've got some heads. They're sitting back over there. And that way I can mock it up and do some nice layup, right? And so we'll see. But I think you can get them, like you can get filament now that's carbon fiber.
Yep.
Because the OEM intake manifold's PA6, which is just nylon with glass reinforcing. And so I think you can actually get nylon with glass and carbon fiber.
Yeah. Big thing on if you're running anything like that is to change your nozzle out. It'll absolutely eat a bronze nozzle out, lickety split.
Well, there's places, what is it, like cut, ship, send or something like that, but you just
send them the STL and have them printed out for you.
Yeah. So
you're not going to do it in pieces and get into flow molding and all that jazz?
I got my 3D printer over there. I'll probably do it in the sections and then kind of lay them up and glue them together and get it all figured out.
It looks a lot like mine.
It's a mistake. It's an Ender 3 Pro.
Oh, okay. I don't even remember mine. I haven't used it in so long.
Well, the hot end quit working on me. It won't feed filament, and I'm like, I was about ready to pull the trigger on a new one, like just get a Prussia and be done with it. So
they're proud of those things, though.
Well, quality ain't cheap, and you get what you pay for, and you pay for what you get.
Back to talking about headers. Yeah, I don't run speed engineering anymore specifically because I saw somebody dare say that he got a speed engineering headers and they didn't leak. I'm glad at least one pair of headers went out of that place that did not leak, because every single pair I've gotten from them, have just been an absolute leak show.
And so, and kind of going back to that, I want to say that the mass bulk manufactured headers for production cars that have to fit on a chassis, there's probably very, very little performance difference between all of them.
Yeah.
Right? Now, you go to some really nice chassis headers made for an actual drag car where it's like exhaust is one of our top priorities. We'll design the frame around that. Then, sure, there will be differences.
Right. There's companies out there that are better than others on the header side of things. I've had a little bit of everyone. I will say, Cooks are so damned expensive, but I've not had a pair of Cooks that did not just fit like a glove.
Well, I will tell you this. So when I first got my car, I'm like, I need to get some headers, right? And so there was another guy with an SS sedan. He totaled his car. He was parting it out. I bought the headers from him, right? And I got them on. I ran them for a while, the ARH headers.
Okay.
And they started having problems. And I just fired off a letter to ARH, just like random whatever, info at or whoever. And I'm like, just to let you know, I think your headers or your exhaust isn't designed very well. I'm having some problems, right? I get a call from the owner and he's like, hey, send them back to me. Here's my secretary's number. We'll get you a shipping label. And so I'm like, well, okay. So I shipped, and I'm like, listen, this is not what I'm after. These are used. There's no warranty. I'm not asking for this. I'm just letting you know, I think you could have designed them a little bit better. He's like, hey, man, it's my company. My name's on there. Like, send them back. So send them back. He's like, yeah, nothing wrong with them. But you know what? Here's like, he sent me all new clamps and everything. It's like, $150 worth of clamps, and they paid shipping both ways. A few years go by, and I'm like, you know what? I think the sealing issues are from these headers. Like, they're not right. And so again, I shipped them back for free, and they're like, yeah, these are damaged. Here's some new headers. And I'm like,
That's impressive.
That's customer service. And
Yeah.
this was before I got into tuning, and I told my local tuner, and he's like, man, that's nothing like my experience with Cooks. I had problems, and they told me to kick rocks, buy a new set.
I believe it.
And so as I get older, the more and more that I realize the importance of customer service, right?
Well,
And
that's the same way whenever I was on Race Week, Rocky Mountain Race Week the last time, whenever I had that wheel fail. God, I can't remember. RC Comp is who I bought the wheels from. And I just posted a picture of it on Instagram, and one of their dudes was reaching out to me that night like, hey, we want you to send that back. Like, that's should not have happened. We don't know. It's like, send both rears back. We'll send you brand new ones. And that right there, next time I'm shopping for wheels, I'm going to RC Comp. It makes a huge difference. And anybody asks me, I tell them, like, listen, I had this happen. They said it was a fluke, and they made it right. Like, you can't ask that. Nowadays, it's like you said, if you can get anybody on the line,
Yeah.
try calling Holly about any product they make and getting a competent human being on the line. And if you do get a human, they're just reading the instructions off the website. So
Yeah.
listen, man, it's 8:40. Time flies.
Holy cow.
Seriously. Any questions? Anybody else? What's Schoenfeld headers decent? I don't know Schoenfeld's. I've got Doug Thorley's that showed up the other day for the new Camaro, so I'll be diving into Doug Thorley's to see if they're worth anything. Stainless X4s from Australia. It's funny that you brought that up, Bernard. I've been seeing a lot more of those on the state sides. So, know that there may be no dumb question, but I have one. I put the wideband in Bank 2 sensor 1 port, but Lambda is 1.1 to 1.6A. Should I put it? No. You want to be pre-catalyst. Don't put it after the catalytic converter. The catalytic converter's whole job in life is to not have that stuff go out the tailpipe. We want to read that stuff to make sure that we're making the adjustments off of it. Mike says use Sanderson headers, but customer service wasn't there. That's the problem, man. Don't know if you guys use Stage 8 bolts. Their great customer service is awesome. I put Stage 8s on the Nova for the first time. Whenever I had to take the heads off to do the head swap, I'd not ran Stage 8s, but I kept on finding loose header bolts. Mm-hmm. And so I ponied up and bought the Stage 8s. And that's one of the big things, maybe hit or miss on some, but I know Cooks come with Stage 8 from the factory because they probably got tired of people calling and complaining about leaking headers. Schmidt says, Dan, I'll hit you up on HB Tuners to follow up on the VVE stuff. Once again, if you guys have not gone over to his website or to his channel, I don't know what this link will be. Okay, I think this is the one to your channel. Let's click it and see. That's it. Click that link. Go drop a sub. And, show him some love. Show him some love for showing up on another live show, man. We always appreciate you, Dan. We're always interested to see what's going on down there in Kansas. What new things are coming out of your mind?
Oh my gosh. I was thinking about creating a website and like really going into detail and mapping out like a Wikipedia, right? And other people could contribute. So it's like just the vagueness of the descriptions we have in HP tuners. Wouldn't it be great if it's like, if you change this, make sure you change this because here's what you need to take into account, or here's what this really does, or this is mislabeled.
Dude, that's one of the favorite things I've ever done on doing videos is going in and finding a parameter that we don't ever mess with. Probably don't need to. It's just changing it to see what it does.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's the thing. And it's like Dan, if you guys did not catch earlier, he was talking about XDF files and stuff like that, which is the bread and bones, like the map are the key to what all this stuff is. These tables that we look at in HP tuners, that's not what stuff looks like. So it's a bunch of hexadecimal that makes no damn sense to anybody. Somebody takes the time to map these stuff out. It's a very trial and error heavy to figure out what this could be, and then it has to be tested and verified that's exactly what it is, and then trying to figure out and so we're getting a small percentage even whenever we're in advanced view, and we have hundreds, if not over 1,000 tables. That's still a small percentage of what the ECU is doing. And not to say that we need all that, because we don't. It's just guys like us that really are interested in figuring out what all that crap is. But it's I mean, that stuff's cool. I love that. I look forward to hopefully you coming out with some XDF info as far as maybe getting into that stuff. I don't know. That's such a topic that's so hard to get into, though.
It's looking at a pile of sand on a beach and saying, you know what? That used to be a sandcastle. Despite the water, the wind, and the waves, and the crabs, and the people walking on it, I bet I could reconstruct that sandcastle. It is labor intensive.
I can only imagine.
Looking at those hexadecimal values, you're like, wait, is that an E or an F? Wait, is that a number 8? Where was I? What was I even doing?
Yeah, it looks like the Matrix. You're basically trying to decipher the Matrix and make sense out of it. So, yeah. But hey, man, Dan, you got anything that you want to add before we jump off?
Man, I think I said my piece. So I appreciate you having me back on the show.
Always, man, always. There's going to be plenty of opportunities as this year goes on. As we're getting back into the habit of having these Thursday night live shows. And I really enjoy having guests on like you that bring an additional insight or approach towards tuning. And I think that it's very critical for this industry as a whole. Sharing information. I can't stress that enough. I appreciate you so much. And like, if you run into any other people that are like us that want to be on the show, send them my way. Tell them to email me. That said, the more that we can get out of this mentality of, oh, this is secret squirrel BS, and oh, if you want to know that, send me a file. I'll do it and then lock it and send it back. No. Let's open this up to everybody. Get all the information out there, and so keep up the good fight, brother.
And you too, sir. Thank you very much for having me.
Listen, everybody, you know the drill. Thanks for stopping by the garage. Remember, ABT, always be tuning.